My crush was sent to a psych ward, so I became a janitor there. I stand frozen just outside Quinn's room, my heart racing. His voice is harsh, echoing down the sterile hallway, filled with so much pain, it almost feels like it's tearing through the walls. No! No, no! Quinn's voice cracks as he shouts, the words sharp and frantic. I saw him! I saw him! He was right there, right in front of me! He's pacing now, back and forth, hands tugging at his hair, as if he can feel the pull of himself, of the storm inside his head. I want to run to him, to grab him and tell him it's okay, that he's not alone. But I know better. I'm just a janitor, the invisible one who cleans the floors. Besides, he barely recognizes himself, let alone remember me. How could I possibly be the one to help him in this state? Quinn, listen to me. Dr. Nolan's voice breaks through the chaos, calm but firm. We're here to help, okay? Just breathe for me, alright? Focus on me. You're safe here. But Quinn doesn't listen. His eyes are wild, looking around the room like he's searching for something or someone that isn't there. Was here. He was. His voice trembles with desperation. Why don't you see him? Why can't you see him too? He's breathing fast now, every inhale shaky, like he's drowning in his own thoughts. Dr. Nolan stepped closer, his hand outstretched. Quinn, we need you to calm down, okay? You need to help us to help you. Just sit down and take a deep breath. But Quinn can't sit. His whole body is shaking, and he's backing away, slamming into the walls. I don't want your help, he screams, his face contorted in panic. I don't need your stupid pills. I need him. I need Owen back. His words are slurring, tangled in his grief, his mind spiraling. I can't breathe. Watching him like this feels like a punch to the gut. Quinn, once full of life, full of warmth, is now broken, lost in his grief, his mind trapped in a nightmare he can't escape. Quinn, please, Dr. Nolan urges, taking another step forward, trying to keep his tone gentle. We're here for you. You're not alone. Just come back to us, okay? But Quinn's too far gone. His hands are shaking as he presses them to his temples, the tension in his body winding tighter with each passing second. He opens his mouth, but it's like the words won't come. Only more broken sobs spill out, each one sharper than the last. No, 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 he whispers over and over again, like a mantra, his voice growing weaker. I can't. I can't. I just want him back. I feel my chest tighten, my breathing hitching. There's nothing I can do. No way to pull him out of this. I stand there, paralyzed, watching as Quinn's breakdown consumes him completely. The doctors move toward him again, their voices quiet, trying to coax him into some kind of peace. But Quinn's not listening anymore. He's lost, and I am powerless to bring him back. It's strange standing here at Owen's funeral. There was a part of me that still can't believe he's really gone. But what hurts more is seeing Quinn, the man I've loved for almost all my life, completely shattered. I've known Quinn since our childhood, watched him laugh, cry, and grow into the kind, bright person he is. He's always been my best friend, and sure, I'd wish, maybe selfishly, that one day he'd see me as something more. But then he met Owen, and it was clear he found the love of his life. I wasn't happy when they got married, I won't lie about that, but I didn't want this for him. I never wanted him to go through the pain of losing someone he loved. Now, watching him stand there, broken, barely able to keep himself together, it's like my heart's breaking with him. Owen's family sits a few rows ahead, stiff and silent. They're all here, but none of them seem to be grieving. They never liked Quinn. I doubt they truly cared about Owen either, at least not the way a family should. To them, he was more of an image, something they tolerated to keep up appearances. Their faces are blank, not the kind of faces you expect at a son's funeral. But honestly, I don't care about them. I barely even look their way. All I care about is Quinn. Quinn, who looks like he's lost all his light. He's just standing there, staring down at the casket, like he's trying to understand how this could be real. I wish I could take his pain, even just a piece of it. Because seeing him like this, so hollow, is almost unbearable. I want to tell him he's not alone, that I'm here, that I'll always be. But somehow, saying it out loud just doesn't feel like enough. So I stand by his side, silent, just hoping he's not as alone as he feels. It's been a month since the funeral, and Quinn, he's lost himself completely. He doesn't sleep, doesn't eat. He just spirals deeper and deeper until he's barely Quinn anymore. He's a danger to himself, lashing out at anyone who tries to help him. No one knew what else to do, so eventually, they sent him to a psych ward, an asylum. Even just thinking about it makes me sick. I can't stay away. I need to be close somehow. I go through every option, but the only position I can qualify for there is a janitor. It's not what I ever imagined doing, leaving my company and everything I had so hard to build in my hands with my brother, pausing my life completely. But for Quinn, I'd do anything. So here I was, sitting in a small office with a woman named Miss Hampton. She's got my resume in front of her, scanning it with a furrowed brow. After a minute, she looks up at me, confused. But you have a PhD. You're significantly overqualified. Why are you interested in this position? As a janitor? Her tone is a mix of curiosity and concern. I take a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I have my reasons. She narrows her eyes slightly, clearly not satisfied with my answer. Are you sure about this? The work is difficult. Not many people can handle what they'll see. And the pay? I'm sure. I say, cutting her off gently. I'm trying to keep my voice even, but I can tell she senses the urgency behind it. I know what I signed up for. She studies me for a moment longer, and I can tell she's torn, probably wondering what could drive me to do this. But she doesn't push any further. Instead, she nods, setting my file aside. Well, she says slowly, if you're sure, then welcome aboard. I shake her hand, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread settle over me. I've done it, at least for now. I'll be close enough to watch over Quinn. By the end of the first week, I'm sore all over, scrubbing down the grimy floors when a fellow janitor, Jerry, walks over, shaking his head with a smirk. Kid, you're really out of your element here, aren't you? He chuckles, watching me fumble with the mop. Yeah, you could say that, I mutter, wiping the sweat off my forehead. Guess I didn't realize how much work this would be. He raised an eyebrow. So I stick around. I mean, now I'm in here pushing a mop for minimum wage. I hesitate, glancing out the hall where Quinn's room is. I've got my reasons. Jerry squints, clearly not buying my vague answer, but he doesn't push it. Instead, he hands me a bottle of cleaner. Here, this one's stronger. Should help with the floor. And try to keep your back straight, or you'll regret it by next week. Thanks, I say, grateful. I spray the cleaner, scrubbing even harder, hoping the work will distract me, but all I can think about is Quinn. Every time I pass his room, I catch a glimpse of him, a shell of the person I used to know. Movies at the asylum was one of the rare times it felt like almost normal. They gather up some of the patients who could handle it, bring them into a common room, and play a Disney movie. Something bright, easy, and happy endings. Today, they were playing The Lion King. I was cleaning the back, but I couldn't help watching Quinn as he sat there, eyes on the screen, barely blinking. He looked empty, distant, like he wasn't really seeing anything. Then Hakuna Matata started playing. The chest tightened. That song. It took me right back. Quinn and I used to belt it when we were kids, yelling the lyrics at the top of our lungs. Of course, I didn't think he'd still remember it. But suddenly, I saw him mouthing the words, almost unconsciously. I froze, not daring to breathe. And then, just barely, he started to sing along. It was soft, shaky, but it was Quinn's voice, like it hadn't been so long. He wasn't talking about Owen. He wasn't lost in darkness. He was there, singing the same silly lyrics we used to sing when we were kids. Quinn, I whispered under my breath, feeling this strange mix of shock and hope. One of the nurses noticed. Her eyes widened as she glanced at me. Has he spoken at all recently? She asked softly. No, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. Nothing about anything besides. I trailed off, not wanting to say Owen's name, but here he was, singing about no worries, and just for a moment, like the old Quinn. As the song went on, Quinn kept singing, almost smiling, like maybe he had forgotten who he was or where he was. My heart ached watching him, but for the first time, it was in a good way. I could barely believe it, but maybe he hadn't lost himself entirely. I was cleaning in the hall when I heard it, a soft, shaky breath, then a muffled sound like someone was struggling to keep it together. I turned and saw Quinn in the corner, clutching at his chest, his face pale. His eyes were trembling, and his eyes were wide, unfocused, darting around like he couldn't find a safe place to land. "Quinn!" I called out, trying to stay calm, even though my own heart was racing. I looked down the hall, hoping a doctor or nurse was nearby, but there was no one, not a single person. I panicked for a second, not knowing what to do. But I couldn't just stand there. I walked over and knelt beside him. "Quinn," I said softly, "it's me, Aiden." But he didn't seem to hear me. His breathing was coming in rapid, shallow bursts, and he was gripping his shirt like he was trying to keep himself from unraveling. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then gently reached out, placing my hands on either side of his face. "Quinn, look at me," I said, his voice slow and steady. He didn't react at first, but I moved closer, pressing my forehead gently to his, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. Just breathe with me, okay? In and out, nice and slow." I started taking slow, deep breaths, hoping he'd follow my lead. For a moment, nothing happened, and I worried it wouldn't work, but then little by little, his breathing began to match mine, falling into the same rhythm. His shoulders relaxed, the tension slowly melting away, and he closed his eyes, finally grounding himself. I kept my forehead pressing into his, my hands steady on his face, and for just a second, I let myself feel how much it still meant to me. Quinn, my Quinn, was still in there somewhere, hidden beneath all the pain. He opened his eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw something in them, a flicker of recognition, of familiarity, like he knew me. But before I could say anything, the sounds of footsteps echoed the hall. The doctors rushed in, and their voices low but firm, asking Quinn if he was alright. I quickly let go, stepping back to give them space as they took over, checking his pulse, guide him to sit down and breathe. I watched as they led him away, his gaze dropping the moment gone. My chest ached, the feeling of his breath in sync still with mine, lingering, reminding me of what we once shared, and of all I was still holding on to. Since the incident, Quinn seemed comfortable, calm in my presence, and a bit more open. It was more than I could ask for, and so slowly, I started to do everything that might help him. One day, I walked into Quinn's room with a bundle of white sheets, paints, and brushes. He looked up, surprised. "What's all this?" he asked, eyeing the supplies suspiciously. "I thought you might like to paint again," I said, trying to sound casual. Quinn's hands reached out, brushing against the canvas and paints. "Paint," he mumbled, like he was tasting the word. He picked up a brush, rolling it between his fingers, his gaze distant. "You used to say painting was like, I don't know, like therapy," I offered, watching his face carefully. "Just a way to get everything out." He looked up at me, eyes slightly softer but distant. Maybe. He glanced down at the paints again, almost as if he was meeting an old friend he didn't recognize. "It's here, whenever you're ready," I said gently, leaving the supplies on the table. "No rush." As I left, I caught a glimpse of him, still holding the brushes, as if he was searching for something he lost, but wasn't ready to let go of just yet. It had been weeks of progress, small steps forward for Quinn, but today he hit rock bottom again. I could hear him from down the hall before he even reached his room, his voice tearing through the walls. "No! No! No!" His shouts echoed, raw and desperate. I saw him. He was right here. Right here. I froze, feeling that familiar, helpless ache in my chest. He was pacing, tugging at his hair, his whole body in turmoil. Dr. Nolan and Dr. Lee were there, trying to calm him down. Quinn, focus on me. Dr. Nolan's voice was firm but calm. You're safe here. Just breathe. But Quinn was spiraling. He was here. Owen was right here. Why can't you see him? His voice cracked, and he was shaking, his eyes wild, filled with the desperation that hurt to witness. I couldn't stand back any longer, heart pounding. I rushed forward, grabbed his face in my hands. Quinny, I whispered, using his childhood nickname he hadn't heard in years. It's me. It's Aiden. I'm right here. His frantic eyes met mine, his body slowly stopping and trembling. For a second, his panic softened. Aiden, he whispered, barely audible, like he couldn't believe it. I nodded, holding his gaze. Yeah, it's me. Just breathe, Quinny. I'm here. He stilled, his shoulders sinking as he took a sharky breath. The doctors moved in quickly, taking over now that he calmed down, their voices low and steady. I let go, stepping back to give them space, but the pit in my stomach only grew. Something had triggered him this time, something big. Then I saw it. Near the edge of his bed, half crumpled, was a newspaper with the front page headline. Man takes his life due to a family pressure. My stomach twisted. I picked it up, folding it carefully, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Was this what triggered him? But why? Why had this triggered him? My mind spun with doubts and questions about whether Quinn's pain went beyond Owen's loss. With time, Quinn started to get better, having fewer and fewer attacks and opening up more. The best part was he knew now. I didn't know if he recognized me as his best friend, but he knew me, and for me, that was enough. I was mopping the hallway outside Quinn's room when I heard his voice, quiet and rough. Aiden. I looked up, surprised. He hadn't called me by my name in days. Yeah, Quinny? You okay? He didn't answer at first, just stared at the wall. They did it, you know, he murmured, almost to himself. My heart skipped a beat. They? Who's they, Quinny? He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Doesn't matter. They wanted him gone, and now he is. I felt a chill run down my spine. Quinn, if someone hurt Owen, he interrupted, voice low and bitter. Hurt him? They destroyed him, Aiden. They got what they wanted. I leaned closer, desperate. Quinn, who are you talking about? Who did this? But he clammed up, his gaze going distant again. It doesn't matter anymore, he whispered, looking away. I felt my throat tighten. Quinn, please, if you know something. They did it, Aiden. He repeated softly, voice filled with pain, but he didn't say another word, just turned to face the wall, shutting me out again. I sat on my bed, replaying Quinn's words over and over again. They did it, Aiden. It was like a bad song stuck in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the pain in Quinn's face, the weight he carried. It wasn't just grief, it was fear. And whatever happened to Owen, I was starting to believe it wasn't an accident. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to find out what happened, even if it meant going behind everyone's back. I couldn't sit back and watch Quinn suffer. My first step was to find people who knew Owen, maybe old friends or family members who would be willing to talk. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Owen's family wasn't exactly approachable, and they definitely were fond of Quinn. But I was ready to push boundaries, if it meant getting answers. I grabbed the phone, checking old numbers, trying to remember anyone who might know something. It felt strange sneaking around, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Owen's death was more than a tragic accident. I owed it to Quinn to dig deeper. If there was any chance that they had a hand in this, then I needed to find out, and I needed to protect him. Quinn deserved to know the truth, and I wasn't going to let him go through this alone. I managed to find an old friend of Owen's, a guy named Mark. We met up for a quiet cafe downtown. As soon as we sat down, I jumped right in. Did Owen ever talk to you about his family? Mark sighed, his expression heavy. Yeah, they gave him hell, man. They never accepted him, especially after he married Quinn. I nodded, my stomach churning. Did they ever threaten him? Mark looked around before leaning in closer. It was more like they pressured him, constantly. They'd call him, showed up unannounced, tell him he was ruining his life. He tried to brush it off, but I could tell it got to him. Especially his dad, he was relentless. My fists clenched under the table. I felt sick hearing this. You think they'd ever hurt him? Mark hesitated. Look, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't put it past them. They hated Quinn, and they'd do anything to keep Owen away from him. Just be careful, alright? I left the cafe with my mind reeling. Owen's family wasn't just cold, they were toxic, maybe dangerous. And suddenly, Quinn's words, "They did it," felt more real than ever. Each day, I found small ways to help Quinn reconnect, to bring out the memories that were filled with pain. One day, I managed to sneak in a playlist of songs we used to sing along as we were kids, lighthearted tunes that felt like pieces of home. I handed Quinn the earbuds, and he looked at them, a bit confused. What's this? Just something familiar, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, though my heart was racing. Give it a listen. I played one of the old songs, and at first, he just listened in silence, his face blank, but slowly, I noticed his foot tapping along with the beat, his fingers drumming against his knee. Then, he started humming softly, the sound warming the space around us. I felt a smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. It was the first time I'd seen him so relaxed, so Quinn. After a few songs, he looked over at me, his eyes softened. Why are you doing all this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because you're my friend, Quinn, and I miss this, I said simply. The good memories, you know? I just thought, maybe they could help you feel more like yourself. Quinn nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he gave me a small, real smile. He leaned against me, letting his head rest on my shoulders as the music played on. We sat together like that, surrounded by old songs and quiet laughter. His face was peaceful, his eyes soft with nostalgia, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. It was like I finally reached him, even if it was just for a little while. One evening, as I was organizing some of Quinn's things, I found a small, tattered notebook buried under a pile of old clothes. Owen's handwriting was scrawls across the cover, and my breath caught. A diary. I opened it, my hand shaking, flipping through the pages with thoughts, confessions, and fears. My stomach dropped as I read. Owen had written about his family and how they never accepted him and Quinn. But it wasn't just disapproval, it was anger, resentment, even threats. They kept telling me I'm ruining the family name, one entry read. Another said, sometimes I feel like they'd rather see me gone than with Quinn. The other words were like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just tension, it was pattern, a dark cloud hanging over both of them. The more I read, the clearer it became. Owen had been terrified, and he didn't feel safe. He hinted that his family might go to any lengths to keep him and Quinn apart. Clutching the diary, I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. I finally found something solid, something that could prove that this wasn't an accident. But at what cost? Quinn had a rare moment of clarity. We were sitting in his room, and he was staring off into space when he suddenly spoke up. You know, Owen used to talk about them, and how he felt trapped. I glanced over, my heart racing. Trapped? By his family? He nodded, his face pale. They'd call him, pressure him, make him feel like he was a failure for being with me. His voice cracked. He tried so hard to keep it together, but they broke him down bit by bit. I reached over, giving his hand a squeeze. Quinny, I'm so sorry. He didn't deserve any of that. Neither did you. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. Aiden, It wasn't an accident. I think they finally pushed him too far. The realization felt like a weight on my chest. Sure, Owen's death was written off as an accident. A car, due to some mechanical issue, drove off the cliff, but no one really knew what had happened. Was it really intentional? Was Owen willing to drive it off since he could no longer take it? No one knew. And now, because of all this, Quinn's pain ran deeper than grief. He'd been carrying guilt for something he had no control over, and now I knew we had to uncover the truth. It was Quinn's last day in the asylum, and mine too. 8 months. 8 months of watching him fight through this pain, working to rebuild himself, piece by piece. Today, I came to bring him home, and when I reached in his room, I found him there, sitting quietly, with a brush in his hand, painting on a canvas, propped against the wall. I stepped closer, careful not to disturb him. My chest tightened, and when I saw him, he was painting. Owen. His brush strokes were gentle, almost reverent, capturing the way he remembered Owen, alive, smiling, peaceful. Quinn was lost in his work, the softness in his gaze telling him he was somewhere in his memories, not in this room. I walked up beside him, brushing a hand gently through his hair before pressing a kiss to his head. He looked up at me, a calm I hadn't seen in his eyes before. Aiden. I met his eyes, waiting. His voice came out as a whisper, but soft and certain. I want to visit him, he said, almost like he'd been holding onto those words for a while. Can we? I nodded, my hand resting on his shoulder. Yeah, Quinn, we sure can. A small, grateful smile appeared on his face, and he took a deep breath, as if letting go of something that had weighed him down for far too long. Together, we left that room, leaving behind months of pain and uncertainty. As we walked toward the corridor and out of the asylum, Quinn's hand found mine, holding tight as he stepped forward, ready to face what lay beyond those walls, and both our futures finally stretching open before us. The sun was setting when we finally found ourselves in front of Owen's headstone. The air was quiet, almost peaceful, and Quinn stood there, taking a long, steadying breath before kneeling down. He placed the painting, Owen's face, painted with such a care and love, against the grave. For a moment, he just stared, his fingers brushing over the edge of the canvas, and then he closed his eyes, whispering a prayer. It was a goodbye, not to erase Owen, but to let go of the pain that had gripped him for so long. Quinn stood up slowly, looking lighter somehow. He turned to me, and there was this look in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. Something strong, clear. Aiden, he started, his voice soft but steady. What you've done for me, there aren't enough words. I don't even know where to start. I know it though. I know it in my heart, even though you've never said anything. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So, do you like me, Aiden? I felt my heart race as I looked at him, my hands reaching for his almost instinctively. Quinn, I don't just like you, I love you. I've loved you for as long as I've known you. For a second, he looked surprised. Then a smile broke across his face, and before I knew it, he was running into my arms, holding me tight. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the weight of every moment we shared, every struggle, and the relief of finally being here with him like this. Quinn pulled back, just enough to look up at me, his eyes bright, a mix of joy and something like nervousness. Aiden, I don't think I'm in a place where I can give you everything you might want from me, but if you'll have me, I'd happily spend the rest of my days giving you everything I have left. I couldn't help it. I cupped his face and kissed him softly, letting every feeling I'd have hold back finally spill over. It was a kiss filled with all the hope, all the dreams, I never dared to imagine might come true, and for the first time, everything felt perfect. As we walked away from Owen's grave, hand in hand, it felt like we were stepping into a new chapter. Quinn had found some peace, and I found a love I'd only ever dreamed of. Though we uncovered so much about Owen's death, Quinn decided not to press charges against his family. He believed, deep down, that despite everything, Owen wouldn't want them to suffer. He wanted to let go of the bitterness, and I respected that. Our future felt open, bright in a way I hadn't felt in years. Quinn wanted to get back to painting, and I planned to be there for every brushstroke. We didn't talk much about the future. We didn't need to. Just being beside each other was enough. Whenever I looked at him, I saw his smile, the warmth in his eyes, one I hadn't seen in so long. I knew I was finally home, and so was he. The end. Do you think love can overcome grief? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.